And there we are, folks. We have hit 2 o'clock in the afternoon here in UK time, and want to just say a very warm welcome to you wherever you are around the globe joining us for this presentation this afternoon. Delighted to say that we have got colleagues joining from very many time zones, very many territories who have signed up to be with us today. We're expecting well over 100 people to be on this webinar. My name is Dan Campsall. I am the chairman of Agilicis, working here in the UK, and have for a number of years now had the privilege of being involved in the Prince Michael Awards as a judge and also helping to coordinate some of the awards. It is my privilege to chair us through a chunk of our time together this afternoon. I'm also joined by Adrian Walsh in that task. Adrian will be known to very many of you, I know, because he is synonymous with the Prince Michael Awards, having been involved with it for so many years, and it's great to have him here. Now, for many of us, December is a focal point in the road safety calendar, because it's the point at which we get to enjoy a celebration of the award winners for the Prince Michael Awards, and that celebration typically takes place in London each December. For those of you who've had the opportunity to attend, it's a real highlight both personally and professionally, because it's a great event at the Savoy Hotel in London. It's a brilliant opportunity to connect with colleagues from around the world, to share experience and knowledge, to hear from award winners, and also to enjoy what is just the best event in the road safety calendar, I would argue, anywhere in the world. So it was a real shame that we were not able to host the awards in that manner in 2020. And it's very hard to replicate that online, but we're going to do our best this afternoon. We're going to seek to bring you something of the sense of the achievement of the award winners that we are celebrating this afternoon. There's 3 of them that we're going to be taking a look at in particular. And one of the key ways in which we want to add to that sense of occasion that we would typically enjoy when we are together there in London is that Prince Michael has recorded a message himself to the award winners that we are going to play for you now. So let's first off hear from the Prince in his own words.
Over the years, many of my award winners have been the inspiration behind some of the most successful innovations which have reduced road risk and saved lives. They've set high standards of good practice at every level, from local to international. The awards recognize achievement and innovation, but their fundamental purpose is to demonstrate to interested professionals how those particular initiatives have worked. Sharing knowledge and replicating good practice has always been essential, but this is now even more important during the second decade of action, especially if we're to achieve the ambitious goal of halving the number of road deaths worldwide by 2030. If we're going to achieve that, we need not just commitment from governments, but a significant increase in capacity to deliver programs on the ground and improve the way we share our professional knowledge. That's why I've initiated this series of webinars, during which we'll be able to highlight the successes achieved by my award winners and give them the chance to make their ideas and experiences more widely known. We look forward to seeing that happen.
And now I'd like to hand over to Adrian to introduce the first of our presentations. Just to let you know what's going to happen this afternoon, we've got 3 presentations in recorded format that you'll get to sit back and enjoy. But we've then got a question and answer session as well, where I'm going to be joined by Lotta Brondum from the Global Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety, from Claire Wood from Transport Scotland, and by Rajendra Prasad from the Indian Head Injury Foundation, so that we can answer some of your questions about their award-winning programs. So please do, over the course of the next 20 minutes to half an hour, use the Q&A button in Zoom and make sure that you get your questions in so that I can put them to those who've been leading these pioneering programs. Adrian, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Dan. As the Prince said, many awards go to large organizations and others to smaller focused organizations, and they include governments, they include community-led partnerships, they include NGOs, and of course they include both the professional community and the commercial world as well. And this year, some 20 awards went to all kinds of organizations, from global banks down to small NGOs. And the achievement of NGOs is very much the focus, part of the focus today. But the whole focus today is on how you make people safer rather than systems safer. We have been running a series of these webinars, but this one, as I say, focuses very much on the individual and the individuals who are at risk on our roads, and the work done by those who influence their behavior, both in specific terms such as communication, but also in training, testing, and the provision of important knowledge. And the first of these focuses today is on the India Head Injury Foundation, which actually speaks for itself. So Rajendra has recorded something for you all, and then, as we heard, we can come back and ask him and others questions later. So let's hear now from the India Head Injury Foundation.
Hello, I am Dr. Rajendra Prasad. I'm the Honorary Medical Director of the Indian Head Injury Foundation. Our foundation received the Prince Michael International Road Safety Award this year for our work with children in preventing deaths and disabilities from road traffic accidents. I want to talk briefly about our Ride with Safety campaign that won us this award. India is the trauma capital of the world, with more than 150,000 deaths from road traffic accidents. In addition to the deaths, there are 5 times as many people left disabled. Why are these figures so high? Because of not wearing helmets or seat belts, of having not enough first responders who are trained, poor pre-hospital care, and total lack of neuro-rehabilitation. So official figures of 11,000 deaths of children in road traffic accidents is far less than the unofficial estimates, which is nearer the truth, which will be somewhere around 15 or 16,000 children dying every year, mostly children riding pillion, going to school or coming back from school. And therefore, the Institute of Road Traffic Education in India has noted the serious issue of two-wheeler occupants in the whole of Southeast Asia. 38% of all deaths on roads involve two-wheelers and its occupants. The United Nations has said just wearing a helmet reduces the risk of dying by 42%. The Indian Head Injury Foundation was formed in 2007 by His Highness Maharaja Gaj Singh of Jodhpur. The Children's Right to Safety program is part of our awareness and prevention of TBI program. We also do courses for pre-hospital care, in-hospital care, and most importantly, neuro-rehabilitation, which is, as I said, totally lacking in India. The campaign for road safety for children has been done in Delhi government schools, which caters to low and middle income families. In 5 years, we've covered 160 schools, made presentations on road safety, and demonstrated what good helmets look like. And we have distributed about 30,000 helmets free. And these are of good standard, which are not available, and we've had to manufacture them specially for this purpose. This is our program in schools. And what has been the impact? So the impact has been that whereas only 1% of children were wearing helmets on two-wheelers, it's now about 35% at 6 months. And we hope that this number increases when we go back and go back to these schools and repeat these programs. One side advantage of this program has been increased use of helmets by parents who were previously not wearing helmets. This program, which covers 40,000 children so far, has won us the British Medical Journal Award in 2017. We hope to repeat the program in the same schools, as I mentioned. We hope the government enforces the Motor Vehicles Amendment Act, which makes it compulsory for children to wear helmets and wear seat belts. We plan to distribute more than 100,000 helmets in the next 5 years, and in this last 1 year and in the next year, we hope to continue our programs online. Thank you. On behalf of the Indian Head Injury Foundation, I want to thank the Prince Michael International Road Safety Award Committee for having given us this award. It will encourage us to go further, to carry on our work, and it will encourage our donors to come forward for their support. Saving every child's life is important. We are talking about saving lives of 15,000 children every year in India. Hopefully, we will be able to take this program to other countries of South and Southeast Asia and Africa. Thank you for your support.
I'd like to start by thanking the Prince Michael Road Safety Awards for having selected the Indian Head Injury Foundation, IHIF, for this very prestigious award, with which we are delighted that our efforts have been recognized. I set up the Head Injury Foundation post the near fatal accident of my son, Yuvraj Singh, on the polo field. Realizing that in India we had a long way to go in providing the necessary services required post-injury, and most importantly, rehab. In India, mostly the hospitals, we have excellent surgeons, but there's no room and time for rehab as the turnover is so fast, and the patients are sent home, and the parents are distraught, not knowing how to handle their loved ones. Hence, it is very important to establish and to emphasize the need for rehabilitation and provide facilities for them. And as a result, we have set up 3 centers in Jodhpur, Delhi, and in Patna. However, we also realized that prevention is absolutely essential, and road accidents in India are a major threat and cause of death. And hence, we began this program for distribution of helmets, because the majority of deaths, particularly young people, young children riding pillion without a helmet, about 12,000 children die every year. And so we chose to distribute helmets, and we have been doing this over the past 5 years, and have distributed 50,000 helmets between Jodhpur, Delhi, Noida, and Gurgaon. We also realize that it is important to get this message across of helmets and seat belts and prevent accidents from happening. I thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rajendra, for that presentation, and I'm sure that there will be questions starting to come in over the course of the next a few minutes about how you've managed to achieve that, to go from a 1% wearing rate amongst children on motorcycles up to 35%, as you reported there, no doubt in no small part due to that huge distribution effort for those helmets as well. Well, so please do get your questions in, but before we get to the question and answer time, we're going to look at our next presentation. Well, actually, it's not a presentation because last week I had the opportunity to sit down and have a chat with several members of the Global Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety. So I was joined by Lotte Brondum, who is with us on the call today, but also joined by Afef Benguenia, who leads les ambassadeurs des routières de la sécurité routière in Tunisia. And I was also joined by Caro Smit from South Africans Against Drink Driving to talk about the work of the Commit to Act campaign. If anyone was at the Stockholm Ministerial event in Sweden last year, you would not have been able to miss the work of the NGOs pulling together at that event to draw attention to the tragic loss of life on our roads around the globe. And what you're going to get to see from this interview is just a little taste of some of the work that went into the lead up to that event and throughout the time in Stockholm. So here's a little bit about the Commit to Act campaign.
Even though it's a 10-year target, there is not a moment to lose. People are dying who could have been saved. We have had enough of talking, and now it's time to act.
We need you, the ministers, the UN, and the private sector to act now and stand by the promises you make and show real leadership. Nothing will change unless you make it happen. Safety is not an option, it's a right.
Well, it's my privilege to be spending some time with one of our award winners here this morning, and that is the Global Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety. And we're going to be talking about the Commit to Act campaign and how they built towards an enormous advocacy program in Stockholm, Sweden last year.
Thank you very much, Dan. And first of all, I just want to thank the Prince Michael Award and the team behind the award for this honor. It's really an honor. It's part of a bigger recognition and acknowledgement of the importance of NGOs and the voice and the empowerment and all the work that NGOs are doing on the ground. So I just want to make sure that we are thanking the team behind the award and Prince Michael himself for this honor.
So Lotte, tell me about the journey from the global meeting in Crete through to Sweden and securing commitments from governments around the world.
In Crete, we had a declaration. We had the Crete Declaration, which was calling for areas around speed reduction and helmet wearing and the areas that people are working with. We had this opportunity for Stockholm, where we brought all the ministers together. So and then we had a UN Road Safety Week, which was addressing leadership. And we wanted to make these, use these things as stepping stones towards much more accountability. And we developed the idea around commitments, getting smart commitments at the local level, getting a smart commitment to helmet wearing, for example, getting a smart commitment to seatbelt wearing, as FF have been doing in Tunisia.
And then you arrive in Stockholm with all of these NGOs and their ministers and their ministerial delegations. Tell us a little bit about what you actually laid on to help continue to build the campaign at Stockholm.
So we created an exhibition area, and that was an opportunity for the NGOs to invite their ministers to come and have a conversation about road safety in their country and globally. In this exhibition, we had built a pile of shoes, 3,700 shoes, showcasing the number of people who die on our roads every day. And that sort of triggered conversations between NGOs and their delegations.
So accompanying all of the work building up to Stockholm and in Stockholm, you were also trying to give voice to people around the world, citizens, through a survey that you conducted. Tell us a little bit about that.
Our members went to malls, they went to the street, they went to schools, they went everywhere. They did on social media, send out this survey. So very, very engaged NGO community collecting voices from their own communities. And we had 132 countries represented in the survey, more than 6,000 responses. That's a high response rate. And it also showed that 95% of the respondents knew someone who had been injured in a crash. Imagine that that's everybody. We heard stories about lack of income, sort of the whole spiral of poverty, that once you have been in a crash, how it impacts your whole family, your level of income, your education level, how you have to stay out of work, how you had to abandon school, how you had lost your jobs. All these things were coming out in this survey, and that's the first survey of that sort. In total, our whole campaign have reached more than 1.7 million people. That was part of Stockholm, passing through there, but also at the local level.
Great, Afef, fantastic to have you with us. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about how you in Tunisia used the Commit to Act campaign to engage with your own ministers in the lead up to Stockholm?
So we focused on the issue of 30 kilometers per hour speed outside schools. We chose just one objective, and this is what we have chosen, so that in 2021, we can hope that the law will be put into actions.
How do you feel that being part of a global initiative helped you to get something to really happen on the ground in Tunisia?
Being a part of a global alliance helped us too much, because we have the tools how we can concretize the campaign, and the Commit to Act campaign gives us all the tools how we can convince our decision makers and how we can make our voices heard by them.
And when you got to Stockholm, did it really help to amplify your voice, to give you greater authority to speak to your decision makers when they could see how you were working as part of a global movement?
For us, the opportunity to present them to Madame Lottie Brondom and to discuss about the road safety issues, and to convince them about what we are doing in Tunisia and about our commitment, and where we came back to Tunisia. So it was more easy to have an appointment with our decision makers. So they knew us. So that helps us very much.
Obviously, you've had significant success through the Commit to Act campaign. You've managed to get decision makers on board. You're managing to get movement at a national level. Where would you like to go next?
We are continuing the campaign to make more pressures on the decision makers to enforce this decree.
Great to have Caro with us from South Africa. Do you just want to tell us a little bit, Caro, about how the Commit to Act campaign has helped you to build pressure for the things that you're looking to advocate for?
It was very good because it raised the awareness that the crashes and deaths and injuries are actually preventable.
And so were there any specific commitments that the South African government have made as a result of the campaign, or are there things that you're still working on?
They are things we are still working on. So we're working very much on asking for more testing for alcohol and lowering the BAC for the novice drivers. And I've just presented to the Parliamentary Committee on that now. And also on the Love 30 campaign, we're looking at the commitments for that in urban areas around schools.
Caro, I understand that you did quite a lot of work on the People Survey and trying to give voice to citizens in South Africa. Do you just want to tell us a little bit about how that worked for you and what you felt that managed to achieve?
It was just very important for them to see and to be able to acknowledge the people who had died, the victims, the many, many victims, because everybody, I didn't find one single person who hadn't lost someone in a car crash in South Africa. And most of them had lost multiple people. And people really, they felt very, very strongly that this should be included as a public health issue in South Africa. And they were calling for our ministers and our parliamentarians to commit to act, to make changes, to bring down the very preventable and unnecessary deaths and injuries on South Africa's roads.
Okay, I'm going to come back to Lotte. Where do you see the campaign going next, and what are the Global Alliance going to be working on to bring change in the future?
Yeah. We have a head of state meeting in 2022, and that's one of the things that we will build the Commit to Act campaign up against and around the UN Road Safety Week, and for very strong call for action for New York in 2022. This award here is really giving that recognition that allows us and endorses that the NGOs have a very strong voice, and the stronger we can come together with one voice, the more people will listen to us.
Adrian, I think it's over to you to introduce our next presentation.
Absolutely, thank you. Well, from a global perspective, we are focusing very much on something much more local. And by local, we go to Scotland. Scotland has got a very advanced and well-defined road safety strategy, which is based on the SAFE system, and its shared responsibility is central to that strategy. So getting people to understand their responsibilities through public information campaigns is something Scotland has been very good at over the years. And this year, they actually won an award for their campaigning, and 2 specific campaigns were highlighted. But here is Claire Wood to tell you all about it from her perspective, all the way from Scotland. Claire.
Hello, I'm Claire Wood. I work in the Strategy and Insight team at the Scottish Government. Scotland's road safety framework outlines a vision of a road network where no one is killed. Young men with their risky driving behaviours are one of the factors that get in the way of delivering this vision. Statistics show that men aged 17 to 29 are more likely to both have a collision and be convicted for motoring offences, partly because of an underdeveloped frontal cortex, partly because of age-related testosterone spikes, and because of deliberate risk-taking behaviour. We set out to reduce KSIs among this age group using marketing activity as a lever for change. We identified an opportunity to use an audience-led approach that encourages good driving by role modelling the desired actions. Science shows us why this audience takes so many risks. Qualitative research unearthed a number of insights which created an opportunity for change. The first of these, confidence or overconfidence. Young men are convinced they're excellent drivers and equate personal confidence with safe driving or driving fast in their book. Then we have invulnerability. With an inflated sense of control of their car, young men often seek to push themselves and their car to the limit. Finally, we have deflection. According to young drivers, everyone else is responsible for accidents because they themselves are in control. Summing all of that up, although safety doesn't really figure as part of our audience's definition of what constitutes a good driver, they nonetheless consider themselves to be the ideal driver, always in control of their car. We hypothesized that if we could highlight the cognitive dissonance, they're not as much in control of their car as they think, we could provoke reappraisal of what makes a good driver. We used Dr. Fiona Phelan's evolved theory of planned behaviour to develop our strategy further. We identified factors, attitudes, norms, self-identity that could encourage young men to recognise times when they're not in control and influence their willingness to change. In and of itself, control is a fairly dry idea. Research discovered a more emotive way to unlock this idea. Respondents unanimously said that they drive more carefully with precious cargo, close family, on board. Unlike traditional authority figures, the police or parents, young men do welcome advice from their gran and hate the thought of letting her down. We piloted multiple creative ideas with our invincible audience in an iterative research process. The most persuasive idea literally dramatised the insight. Whenever a young driver attempted to do something risky, his gran would appear and chastise him. She delivered her message with a wry humour that was engaging rather than preachy, and so proved the perfect messenger for our audience-led strategy. The campaign launched in May 2019 and has been running since. Led by video, digital, and social content, some delivered via their mobile phone, the campaign was supported with placements in cinema, radio, festivals, sports events, pubs and clubs. This is all pre-pandemic, and on podcasts. Partnerships with influencers, including Paul Black and Simon Ferry, a comedian and a sports pundit, allowed us to disseminate our messages credibly and widely. Campaign evaluation carried out by independent research agency Progressive shows that the phase 1 activity hit almost all of our SMART objectives and phase 2 exceeded them. Really interestingly, we've been working with Fiona Filan throughout and measuring the campaign with statements that we've worked together to create to evaluate this ability to influence willingness. Rewiring young men's brains is obviously a tall order, but looking at the attitudinal statements, we're seeing very early signs of some small improvements, with all our fingers crossed. On to Scotland's breathtaking roads. Bikers represent less than 1% of traffic, but account for 20% of fatalities in Scotland. Statistics show that 40 to 54-year-olds who drive on rural roads, and during the summer months particularly, tend to be most at risk. We wanted to try and reduce KSIs among this niche and hard-to-reach audience, but how? Quantitative research and statistics told us who and where the fatalities were most likely to occur. So then we used qualitative research amongst motorbikers in this age group to look for an answer. We learned that this group consider themselves experienced, capable riders who believe safety information is irrelevant. They're not interested in safety advice or messages about risk, as often it's the element of risk that these bikers love. They accept there's a risk every time they ride, but they love the freedom, the escape, the rebellion, the buzz, the fun that it offers them. The risk is part of the thrill, and it's these traits that bond bikers. There's an abundance of biker groups, as you'll know, that flourish both in real life and on Facebook. These groups meet or chat online, swap tips, compare notes, share stories. They've all been driving and riding for years, so we're pretty confident they've learned it all and seen it all. But they are interested in how to be better, more skilled riders, and that created our opportunity. Fundamentally, we needed bikers to realise that they didn't know everything and to be inspired to find out more about how to tackle the bends, bumps, and obstacles most likely to result in a collision if mishandled. We used these insights to develop different advertising ideas and then tested these ideas with the biker community. Breathtaking roads with the strapline, "Don't let them take your breath away for good," was the clear winner in the research. The strategy saw us set out how to produce engaging and educational films that show bikers how to improve their riding skills in the KSI hotspots. These films allow us to highlight specific dangers which we know can lead to KSIs without specifically mentioning safety information and without looking preachy and patronising. Our media budget meant we could pay to reach our audience, but ideally we wanted our messages to be shared by and between the community to maximise credibility. So the films needed to have extraordinary production values in order to have standouts and encourage the audience to share them among their own community. It was also important that they came from relevant, experienced messages. Having built up a substantial following through our Live Fast, Die Old Facebook community, it was the perfect place for launching these films. Live Fast, Die Old is about inspiring bikers to get out on the routes, let them enjoy the ride, teach them how to get the most out of routes, and how to be prepared and use the right skills for each of the tricky points they might encounter. Initially, we developed 3 films focusing on coastal roads, forest paths, and mountain routes, all developed in 2018. A 4th film, Group Rise, was developed in 2019 and shot along a popular biking route in the Scottish borders. We're currently thinking about adding a 5th to the family. In addition to creating content for the Live Fast Die Old community, Police Scotland and Road Safety Scotland also created a series of top tips videos where a police rider demonstrated how to undertake specific manoeuvres safely. And a website sat behind all of this, providing advice, suggested routes, and connecting back to the Facebook community. Campaign evaluation carried out by independent research agencies demonstrated that we'd achieved all our marketing objectives, and 94% of bikers claimed to have changed their behaviour as a result of seeing the campaign. Most satisfyingly, the campaign received widespread support from key biker influencers who are notoriously difficult to win over. We always knew that bikers were most likely to listen to other bikers, so this felt like our greatest achievement. Thank you very much for listening.
Claire, thank you very much indeed, and thank to all the presenters so far. We'll get a chance later in the panel discussion to talk to them all, and afterwards there's all these videos and all the presentations will be available on our websites, the Prince Michael website and the Agilicis website. And it's now I like to turn to Agilicis because it's the team from there that have brought this together, but they've done much more in the last year. They have done a huge amount to support professionals in road safety during the COVID crisis. They've run over 40 hours of webinar and other training, and they produced a really superb piece of information available on a website called Active Streets, which helps people to plan active streets and puts a really helpful planning guide there for professionals who are at the local authority level. Now, Agilicis does everything from a research background and an evidence-based background. Just as in Scotland, the campaigns are evidence-based, well-researched and well-evaluated. That is the hallmark of everything that Agilicis does. So I'm very pleased they've been able to partner with us, as Dan mentioned, to bring together this webinar today. It shows the sort of standards that's available across the world, and also the standard that Agilicis can demonstrate themselves. And it's Dan Campbell really is going to now talk from that experience point of view as he acts as our question master for the panel.
Thank you very much, Adrian. That's very kind of you. And it's very much the team at Agilicis who've done that work, both in the research and developing some of those tools and working collaboratively with colleagues across the sector through what for many of us has been quite a challenging time, and it's been a privilege to see that team engaged in that work over recent months. Right, it's come to that point where we get to talk to our panelists. So I'm delighted to have Lotte and Claire and Rajendra with us. Can I just put out a plea for some more questions, though? We've only got one question in the Q&A panel at the moment, and we're not going to make that stretch for the next 15 to 20 minutes. But fortunately, I've got some questions that I would like to put to the panelists. So unless you just want to listen to my questions, can I suggest that you also get your questions in, and then I'll put those to the panelists instead. Great. So let me start with Rajendra. I'm really interested in what you've done through the India Head Injury Foundation and the history there around addressing head injury in particular. But the movement into distributing motorcycle helmets, did that come because that's the trauma that you were seeing in the hospitals, or because you were doing observational studies and seeing that that was really where the problem was out on the streets? What was it that sort of led you to that point of choosing the motorcycle helmet initiative that you've really pressed ahead with?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I trained as a neurosurgeon in England, and when I came back to India, and in England, everything was taken care of by other people. So pre-hospital care was somebody else's responsibility, and rehab somebody else's. But when I come to India, I realized that I could carry on doing this for the rest of my life and the incidence of head injuries wouldn't decrease. So one way to get at it was to get involved as a community member who generally doctors people would look up to. And so I thought, let's approach the government, change the road safety law. So we were part of the committee that changed the new Motor Vehicles Amendment Act that made it compulsory to have helmets. So we worked there. And the other thing, when we found on the street that you could not get a helmet, you could not get a child's helmet, not even of bad standard, let alone good standard. So we decided, so as a foundation, we thought, now the only way to do this is to get it manufactured and distribute it. But the disappointing thing is that it's an attitude problem that even parents were not wearing helmets. So we needed to get them on board, then go to schools, get the parents on board, give helmets, which they would either sell or give away to somebody else, but not use it. And I said 6 months, 25 to 30% over 6 months. But when we went back, which I hadn't written, that number went down. So in spite of awareness, in spite of giving helmets, the number was going down. And so we need to go back to the school. So I think we need to now, and we have a federal kind of thing that the central government can make laws, but the state governments enforce it. So now I was just thinking, as the other presentations are going on, that I'd have to go to 25 states, convince each of the policymakers and the police that just like wearing masks has become a very important issue, and police are enforcing it. This is something like, if we had 150,000 deaths from COVID in India this year, there have been 150,000 deaths from head injuries every year. So we need to take this. COVID may go away, but this. So, and that was the reason I thought, let's manufacture helmets, let's give the helmets, and then see. But that is not enough. I realized that that's just not enough. Giving people free helmets isn't enough. We need to keep bashing at this public awareness and that way.
And that's amazing. I mean, faced with the challenges that you were faced with, you weren't didn't consider it to be insurmountable to even go into manufacturing the helmets in order to really drive this forward. Can I just ask you, how did you determine which schools to focus on and which areas to address first? Did you look at the data where the head injuries were perhaps at their worst and target those areas, or were you looking for open doors within establishments that would welcome you and your message in?
Well, most of the private schools, children would come in buses, even though without seat belts, and they would come in cars. So we decided to go to the government school where, as I mentioned, low-income families came, often 3 or 4 children on one vehicle. And so we chose that. And then because it's a government, these were government schools, the government would be more likely to come forward and help us in getting them manufactured and distributed in government schools. Like if you didn't have a helmet, for instance, you would not take the exam. I mean, those are the kind of things I'm hoping that if we did it in a government free school, this would come more easily to change the policy, rather than taking a few elite schools and finding a few children and giving them some helmets.
So in your presentation, you intimated that you're looking to make progression with making helmet wearing mandatory. So is helmet wearing actually mandatory and it's about enforcement, or is it actually about getting that onto the state legislature?
We were responsible, one of the NGOs that were responsible to bring an amendment in the central government road safety law in 2019, but none of the states are aware that this has been passed. So now it's a question of going to each of these states and 1.2 billion people and letting them know that this is now law, and you need to wear a seatbelt in the back seat and not have your child stick his head out of the window or through the sunroof, and wear helmets in the car. So this ridiculous situation of the toughest head, the driver, has a helmet, and the weakest heads don't have helmets. And it's this awareness that needs to go, but the awareness isn't there. The law has been made. It just people have to enforce it, and people have to be made aware, and have brand ambassadors may help, as I heard in that last program, getting bikers brand ambassador. Dhoni, our cricket captain, is a former captain, is a great biker himself. So getting a few such brand ambassadors would help.
And certainly in India, you've got a good track record of getting high-profile cricketers on board as brand ambassadors. For anyone who's seen the Road Safety Cricket Series in India, which has been a huge success, and Sachin Tendulkar is the one who's really sort of driven that forward there. And also, you've got a good number of NGOs across the country. So I imagine you've got some great allies from the NGOs that I know are part of the Alliance. So are you working collaboratively with them to really sort of drive this message?
Yes, we are. But as I said, we need to work together, and that really hasn't happened. And this kind of global alliance and and WHO hasn't provided the lead that we were hoping, but I'm still persisting, getting WHO again to get all these NGOs together and get the government. So there is commitment, but it's a struggle. But if Sachin can say, listen, I wear a helmet for one ball coming at me at 90 miles per hour, but here you have a whole truck or bus coming at you, tons of, a heavy vehicle. So why can't you wear a helmet? So a message, he's one of our advisors, by the way, so I have to get him to make a video. But something like that would help.
Excellent. Thank you, Rajendra. I wonder, as we've just talked about the alliance of NGOs and the strength of that Indian chapter, whether I could just come and ask Lotte a couple of questions as well. Lotte, can you just tell us a little bit about some of the kinds of commitments that were made in the run-up to Stockholm? So we heard a little bit from AFEF and from Caro, but obviously there were many others who were working with their national governments and decision makers. What sort of commitments were you managing to achieve there?
Yeah. So we have 54 commitments in total, and they range from national commitments to a national commitment to child helmet wearing, for example, in Vietnam, to a very local commitment to, for example, a speed bump outside a school in a local setting in India. And they are all available, or they all sit on our website, where we have made a dashboard. It's a dashboard that shows when the commitment is made, it's red, and then it turns yellow as it progresses, and then it turns green when it's been met. And we did that actually by request from the NGOs, because they felt that sometimes you get a commitment from your decision maker, whether that being your national decision maker, your minister, or your mayor, or one of your local decision makers. But it often just sits there, and it was the accountability aspect that the NGOs were interested in being visible. And by putting it on our website, it sort of becomes a global concern, or a global aspect, a global call for action. And it becomes something that everybody can see and celebrate as the commitment is progressing and being met, but also can see when progress is not being made. So it's visible on our website, and it ranges from local commitments to national commitments.
I think that's one of the fantastic aspects which you touched on in our interview, was just that press for accountability and not letting people off the hook until that commitment has been followed through on, and the fact that they had to be smart as well. These couldn't just be generalized commitments. They needed to be something very specific and very measurable. The other thing that I was going to ask you was just about the lead up to Stockholm, because it wasn't like you just kind of put all of your eggs in that basket of one ministerial event. There was very much a sort of build up to that, which we didn't really touch on in the interview, which is around the round tables and leading up to the event. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about some of the steps that you introduced in order to get to Stockholm already with momentum?
Yeah, so I just want to talk a little bit back here, because we represent 250 NGOs in 93 countries, and every NGO has their own reality. And what they were calling for was something that was coming from a global level, but could be adapted to the local level. It was also something, they were also calling for something that could be done on a low investment, and that had a participatory and ownership from their side. So we developed the accountability aspect, which was the commitments, and we involved the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for Road Safety, Jean Todt, in some of these roundtables, in getting these commitments from the national level. Then we made the tracker. Then as we were moving to Stockholm, we did the People's Survey with 6,000 responses from 132 countries. We had in Stockholm a people's meeting where the video shows Bright from Kenya making that very strong call to action in front of the pile of shoes. It was very important for us that it was a call from the NGOs, because there was a ministerial meeting next door. This was the NGOs speaking. And we presented the survey. So it was not just us coming up with an idea, but it was a long-term strategy that we had built over a long time in collaboration and participation with the NGOs, with an aim to strengthen the NGOs' voice in the lead up to Stockholm. And I would envision that we do something similar for the head of state meeting, because we need a very strong call to action for the head of state meeting next year. And we have now been recognized in this award for the importance of the 250 NGOs in the Alliance and around the world, who a lot of them are here on the call and who this award really belongs to.
Yeah, that's right. I was looking at some of the names of the participants who are with us this afternoon, and Bright, who you just mentioned, is with us, and you know, a good number of those leaders from the NGO community who really have taken this message and driven it within their own national settings. It's fantastic to have you with us, and that's why I guess you were able to give voice to 1.7 million, I think you said, participants who were engaged in that process. I mean, looking ahead to the head of state meeting, how do you keep that going when we're in a very different sort of situation, you know, with communities locked down? Are you seeing really good any sort of innovation in the NGO community about ways they're keeping the pressure up in spite of restrictions from COVID?
Definitely. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of NGOs who were very left Stockholm with a very strong sense of engagement and had connected very well with their governments. And then the pandemic started. But we have seen that there's a very strong, there's still a very strong push, and there's still a very engaged UN community, which will keep the pressure on. Now we have the UN Road Safety Week coming up in 2 months' time, and we're very active engaging NGOs. And NGOs are very aware of the importance of keeping these key dates and key events, and being sure that they are kept relevant, and you engage the decision makers in this, and that you move from not just working in your own community, but actually to sustainable change. So you might do something. Now the theme on the UN Road Safety Week is 30 kilometers an hour by default in urban settings. And that's important, but it's also important that this becomes a default, this becomes the norm. So it's not just working in a community, but taking a community as an example for the change you would like to see at the national level. And NGOs are really, really good at that. And they're very creative in their approaches to this change, and their approaches to enter into a dialogue and commitment from their governments on this.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lotte. Great. I'm going to come to Claire. Claire, fantastic to hear about the work that you've done in Scotland. And for those of us who are south of the border, we look a little bit jealously at the way in which Transport Scotland has really sort of taken that safe system approach and looked to move much more strategically in that way. But I wanted to ask you actually just about the development of your campaigns, particularly working with a psychologist and using that research base. How did that really sort of change things for you? What did that really help to do for you in terms of the way in which you structured your approach?
Great question. And may I say what a pleasure it is to be here today in such illustrious company, hearing from all of you. Thank you so much for having me. It was fascinating because it enabled us to pick apart the factors that influence the behaviour in the case of our young men. So approaching it without Fiona Filan's help, we broadly knew that they went too fast. We knew the various incidences in which they were likely to get into bother on the roads, but we hadn't given as much thought to the attitudes or the factors in their head that were influencing the decisions that they were making when it came to driving. Working with Fiona Filan helped us really pick apart the different elements of their thinking that were influencing their decisions, both before getting into the car and then in the moment of making the decision that ended up in the potential disaster. So it was really helpful to try and pick off the factors, make sure we're putting together a portfolio of materials that influence all of these factors over time. And the young driver approach was very much considered as part of an ongoing strategy. And the hope was that we could create a jigsaw, if you like, of activity that over a sustained period of time. Back to Rajendra's point, lucky enough to be in a position where we have budgets to support sustained messaging over a sustained period of time, because we know that you can lead a horse to water once and it won't necessarily drink the second time when you try and encourage it to go back. So lucky to have the opportunity to do that, but we were conscious that telling them once to be more careful wasn't going to cut it. We needed to identify the different situations in which they found themselves tempted to make bad decisions when they were driving with friends, when they had a mobile phone call or a text coming into them, when they were on an empty road and it looked from their point of view as if it was safe to be speeding ahead because they knew the road, that it looked empty, all these sorts of things. We wanted to try and land in their minds the different situations in which they're most likely to take these risks, and raise the visibility of these situations, these scenes, in the hopes that when they found themselves in these situations again, they would do what Gran wanted them to do rather than what their little devil on their shoulder encouraged them to do.
Excellent. Yeah, I've had the privilege of working with Fiona on a couple of projects in the past, and she's a brilliant collaborator. I'm delighted to see that you use the prototype willingness model as well. But what you've just said leads quite nicely actually into the question that Ian Wallace has asked. He said, in terms of the Scottish examples, what is the anticipated lifespan of the examples provided, drive like a grand in your car or breathtaking roads? What criteria do you use to determine when the approach has reached the end of its effectiveness?
A good question. We evaluate everything on account of needing to demonstrate that we're delivering value for money to the taxpayer. And it's such an important area and so tricky to measure when it comes to road safety, because just as the example that Rajendra has talked through, it'll take a little while for us to see the impact of our actions when it comes to actual KSI statistics. So doubly important that we're getting a read in the moment of what our activity is delivering. What we would always do is measure the effectiveness of a campaign both before it started, so how can you measure it, of course, but to establish a benchmark and then look at attitudes in the aftermath of the campaign and see what's moved. And as part of that, we'd put measures in place to explore awareness and recall of the campaign itself, of the messaging contained within that. And then each time that we ran the campaign activity, we would run the same evaluation research so that we had a series of sets of data that allow us to unpick when it feels like people are stopping listening to the message in this particular form. So we need to recreate it in some way to make them pay more attention next time.
Brilliant. One more question, if I may. I think one of the other things that came through was the value of piloting and testing messaging with your audience. I just wonder whether you could almost help us to understand what mistakes that might have helped you to avoid by testing them in the first place. You know, do you think it stopped you going down maybe some creative routes that would have just led to something that might have looked great but actually not delivered the kind of message that you wanted?
Another great question. It's been invaluable. With our young driver audience in particular, it's been a really hard one to try and get right, because we'll all know somebody who is like the young driver that we're trying to talk to, absolutely convinced that they drive brilliantly and can avoid any old hazard that the road throws at them. And so extra important that we get the way of packaging our message right to make sure they pay attention in the first place, because the last thing they want is the government lecturing them to drive more carefully when they're out and about on the roads. So creative testing research is invaluable to make sure that the way that we think might be interesting and creative as a way of landing the message with them actually is interested and creative. And we sometimes have fallen into the trap of almost trying too hard to be funny or trying too hard to catch their attention. I remember distinctly testing a lovely creative idea, talking about trying to encourage them to behave more safely on country roads. And we used a sort of, I don't know if you're familiar with The Simpsons, but there's a cartoon in The Simpsons called Itchy and Scratchy, where all sorts of calamitous things befall these two characters. We used an advert style that was reminiscent of Itchy and Scratchy and laid out a catalogue of disasters that befell our protagonist on a country road. And our audience were horrified because they felt that we were being really frivolous and really inappropriately glib about calamitous things that can and have happened to some of the people that they knew when driving on country roads. So it's really interesting to see that Gran obviously sits on the right side of a sort of humorous, tongue-in-cheek, light-hearted approach to the subject, whereas our itchy and scratchy iteration of the message was a total disaster. So it's really, really useful to us to make sure we stay on the right side of what they consider to be effective.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. Thank you, Claire. Well, I'm afraid to say that we've actually run out of time. So it's been just fantastic to hear about the work of these three projects. They're 3 out of about 20 award winners from 2020 in the Prince Michael International Road Safety Awards. So there's a huge wealth there. Please do go and take a look at the Road Safety Awards website and read up on some other award winners. It will no doubt inspire and encourage you to think about your own work and practice and ways in which you could apply some learning from award winners like these. So it just remains now for me to hand back to Adrian to make some concluding remarks to draw our time to a close. Thanks, Adrian.
Well, thank you all very much indeed for your wonderful presentations, and thank the audience for listening and watching. The Prince made the point earlier that his awards are there really to recognise achievement, but perhaps more importantly, to share knowledge so that this can be replicated. And sharing is very much the theme of what he wants done over the next few years. And of course, sharing responsibility is absolutely central to deploying a safe system. So sharing ideas and the sharing of responsibility, as an example from Scotland, are absolutely pertinent to what we want to achieve in the next decade. Good luck to you all, and thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.